Scott Frost had one message for UCF fans at his weekly press conference. The Knights have to get better, fast.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend, Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at UCFKnightzone.com. Go check out all his written work there and my written work as well, too. On today's show, Andrew, we're going to give some QB updates. Scott Frost spoke to the media. He talked about his QBs. He also talked about a need to be more explosive on offense, and he likes his team. We'll talk about how much he likes his team in our last segment. Let's start at the top. QB updates. Now, you said this. You reported this after the game. Great live report from the field, my friend, by the way. Great job there. Cam Fancher did not suffer a concussion. It was a back leg issue. And the staff will gauge him this week to see how he is. But Taven Jackson earned a lot of praise for stepping in and handling the moment. It's something we've talked about on this show that I'll get into in just a second. Also said that playing two QBs is on the table at least until the first bye, which essentially means this week versus North Carolina A&T. On the table doesn't mean likely, though. And I want to, first of all, well wishes to Cam Fancher. Speedy recovery. You never want to see anybody get injured. That young man worked very hard for the opportunity to start that game, and I hate to see anybody get injured. But Taven Jackson had to step in. Injuries happen, and Taven Jackson had to step in, and he stepped in to the tune of 17 for 24 for 282 yards and a couple of really big touchdowns that won the game for UCF. Again, Scott Frost praised him for stepping in and handling the moment. You've heard me say this on this show. You never know when your time is going to come, and you're not guaranteed a second interview when it comes to being the starting quarterback of a Power 4 football team. Taven Jackson said, you know what? I'm going to nail this interview. And he went out and he did what he had to do to at least make it a discussion about who goes out first for game 2 if both quarterbacks are healthy. I like the the poise that he showed. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. Not every quarterback is ready to step in and perform well. And Taven Jackson shook off a slow start on that first drive and then came back and absolutely dialed in. 2 QB usage is not off the table, but should it be off the table?
Absolutely should be off the table. One thing that Taven Jackson said in his post-game comments when he was asked is that he's been in this position before where he's lost out in the starting quarterback competition. Happened in Tennessee. It happened in Indiana. So it was something he was used to. And he's had opportunities to step in when needed and try and take care of business. And he's like, I've done this before. So it wasn't a foreign concept to me of being the second string guy and having to be called in to fill. And I rise to the occasion. That's what he did. He started off kind of slow, a little, getting some of the jitters out, a little bit of short stuff. But as Scott Frost also said, you take what the defense gives you. And, they were covering the back thirds pretty well for a while. And it forced them to check down, a lot of check downs. But UCF was still able to move the ball. That eventually pulled those defensive backs up a little bit, those linebackers up a little bit. And that's when they were able to start to open the field up. When Jackson was able to roll out, he was able to, see down the field. You talk about the offensive line and explosiveness. Their pass blocking was fair, other than the absolute blown block that got Cam Fancher hurt, which looked like Jay Nixon just did not pick up the guy.
Yeah.
Unabated to the quarterback. But if you look at, the pass blocking, by and large, you know, the UCF quarterbacks, Jackson and Fancher had time, and they were able to do stuff. Either it was tuck the ball and run, because the coverage downfield was pretty good, but you left the entire middle half of the field wide open. You see what the defense gives you, you run with it. It's not coincidental that Pro Football Focus's number 1 and number 3 players on UCF's offensive grades was Taven Jackson and Cam Fancher, respectively, with Myles Montgomery in the middle. And the fact that, those two quarterbacks, 1 and 3, it just shows, even though the numbers may not have backed Fancher, he actually was pretty effective, when he needed to be. If he kept playing, who knows what would have opened up as the game went on, because the defense changed. UCF was able to focus on the run early on. Well, the run was taken away from them in the second half. And they kept running Myles Montgomery up the middle, and it wasn't going anywhere. And he lost those big explosive plays that were happening in the first half. That's when they switched gears and started focusing on passing the ball. They were basically daring Taven Jackson to throw the ball. But you know what? Challenge accepted, and it worked. So I think this is something that isn't getting enough credit to the coaching staff of adjusting the offense based on what the defense was giving them, and putting the quarterbacks in a position to be successful, especially Jackson. Later in the game, I'm on the field towards the end of the game. I'm standing behind a couple of UCF administrators, and they're wondering why UCF is running the ball up the middle and forcing Jacksonville State to burn timeouts. They're kind of far for field goal range, and you already had a kicker who missed one inside 50 yards. So they're like, oh, what are they doing? And then third down went over the top. They got sucked in, and then went right over the top to DJ Black. Boom, touchdown. That's the ball game. Great maneuvering. And you know what? If that didn't work, you still have the field goal opportunity, and you play for overtime, because Jacksonville State at that point would have, didn't have many timeouts to work with. They had to burn them. So I think the coaching staff needs some credit here for helping game plan to allow the quarterbacks, especially Jackson, since he played the majority of the game, to be successful. That it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah, look, I thought Scott Frost was in his bag of calling plays. There were guys running open downfield. You've got to execute at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to, and they seem to execute a lot better with Taven Jackson in there at quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how Scott Frost plays this. You named Cam Fancher your starter, and sometimes coaches have to let go of their ego a little bit in terms of who they named first to move on. But he was very non-committal when it came to quarterback and in saying, hey, look, this competition could continue on into the first few games. But I thought Taven Jackson played well enough to maybe not slam the door shut, but maybe just have it propped open with a doorstop or something here. Now, he's got to go out and do it again. But certainly a good showing versus North Carolina A&T will go a long way into getting him there. But look, UCF got some explosive plays from Taven Jackson. They could have had one from Cam Fancher on the first play of the game. But we'll talk about their need to create more explosive plays this weekend versus North Carolina A&T right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, and you don't have the full picture. You can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives, and if you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, with code Locked On College. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NFL season is almost here. College football season is definitely here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Get in the game with FanDuel. UCF needs more explosive plays, Scott Frost said. As a matter of fact, he went on to say that they can't have 17-play drives that come up empty. I can tell you that should go without saying, but he's right. You've got to finish off drives. That points to poor red zone execution when you can march all the way down the field, but then come up with no scores. It also could point to problems on special teams, but ultimately only 17 points in this one. A little bit disappointing. Now, I want to give credit to Jacksonville State, a very good defensive football team, a well-coached defensive football team. As you know, I covered Charles Kelly as co-defensive coordinator while he was at Auburn last year, and I knew he would have this team prepared. I felt like UCF should just have more dogs than Jacksonville State, which certainly they did, but it was a lot closer than it should have been, maybe. And I say that because first play of the game, they take a shot, and Cam Fancher has a guy running free, Andrew. If he hits them
just a step too far
in the first 10 seconds of the game. Look, explosive plays can really help save you as a football team when you're at where UCF is at in terms of your rebuild. And, I think Scott Frost believes he has the wide receivers to make explosive plays in the pass game. But you said something in the first segment about Jacksonville State kind of shutting down the run. It was what I saw was they when Cam Fancher was in, you didn't show that you could move the ball effectively through the air. And the one thing that you don't want them to do is control the game on the ground. So they took away the only thing that they thought UCF had, and they forced UCF to beat them through the air with Taven Jackson's arms, and he did it. So you've got to be two-dimensional here on offense. You cannot be one-dimensional, or bad teams will have a chance to beat you. Now, North Carolina A&T is not a team that should beat UCF by any stretch of the imagination. And Taven Jackson's ability to be able to create explosive plays in the passing game, I think, is going to be key to UCF winning this game in the manner that they should.
Yeah, I think it's not just explosive play from downfield, but it's also explosive play from the offensive line.
Yeah.
And this was an area that they were not overly impressive with is their run blocking. You look at Pro Football Focus, and there's no lineman with a grade of 70 or higher.
Yeah, I saw that.
You have two guys with 60 with over 60. And Carter Miller was your best linebacker at 66-1, which is, it's not great. It's fair. But then you look way down, Preston Cushman, in the 50s, Paul Rubelt in the 50s, Gard Memlar in the 50s, even your tight ends, Kylan Fox in the 50s, Dylan Wade in the 40s. I mean, this is the run blocking grade. It worked early on because the defense was balanced. They were expecting run and pass. So they played more of a balanced defense and allowed UCF to kind of, hammer down the run. Well, they kind of went full tilt on the run, especially after, the Fancher injury. And, you close out the first half. Okay, if you're going to run the ball, we're going to make you pass it. Like you said before, they dared them to throw. But, part of the problem, and they kept going back to the run wasn't working. Blocking wasn't there. However, you look at the pass blocking numbers, they were solid. Keegan Smith, 85. Cameron Kinney, 81.7. And then it drops off into the 60s. But I mean, the fact that your 2-guard rotation, your right guard, both had grades over 80, just shows the pass blocking was much more solid. You only had one guy under 60, and that was Carter Miller at center. But that pass blocking made a huge difference. So you want to get that explosive play, you need to have the blocking to do it, either through the on the ground or in the air. Good pass block in the air, set up some good passes downfield that we were not seeing on the ground in the second half. There wasn't that chunky yardage that we would expect to see from Montgomery that we saw in the first half. And then Jay Nixon was nowhere to be found pretty much in the second half. And Frost even commented, I need to rotate my guys better. We just kind of sat back on Myles. Myles was overrun. I think that was part of it. Is he was used too much, and I think he wore down the side. I mean, the guy is got so much heart, and you don't quit or give up or anything like that. But I mean, you got to spell the guy a bit, and you have a rotation for a reason, and they went away from it. They didn't utilize it, and I think that hurt the running game as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Look, Miles Montgomery is going to be a playmaker for this team. 21 carries for 79 yards. The per carry average dropped off a little bit as Jacksonville started to stiffen up against the run. But look, he also had a big time catch with a run up the sideline. He was UCF's leading receiver in this game as well, too, with 71 yards receiving. So he's a playmaker. He is a playmaker for you so far. Now, DJ Black on Dylan Wade, those guys showed me quite a bit if they can continue to step up. I thought they spread the ball around very well in the passing game. As a matter of fact, 8 different nights caught a pass. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can continue to spread the ball around the way that they did. It was pretty balanced there. I mean, you had four guys with 3 receptions, 2 guys with 4 receptions, and you didn't have to overpass the ball in this one. Again, 24 attempts for Taven Jackson. Now, look, UCF had 33 pass attempts to 36 rush attempts. I think in a perfect world, you see maybe a little bit more on the rushing side in this system. 55-45, I think, would be a better split for this team and the talent they have. But you also want to see that play count go up. I would like to see them running closer to low 70s in terms of the amount of plays that they're running, less 3 and outs, more sustained drives, as Scott Frost said. Well, look, Scott Frost likes what he's seeing from his team, and that can't be understated, right? Like he's got to like what he's seeing from week to week. He's got to like the fight that this team has potentially, and he's got to like that his players are buying in to the game plan, to what they want them to do. How much are they buying into what they want them to do? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. That's right. I said Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive. And that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to delivering a driving experience that feels alive in every single detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more than 25 IIHS Top Safety Pick Awards, more than anyone else as of August 2025. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. You can feel it in the moment you get behind the wheel, the smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's no more to every player, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda Move and be moved. I love that. I love that from Mazda. Guys, we need your help here at Locked On UCF. We got a survey, and we need you to fill it out. We need more feedback to make your favorite podcast even better. That includes Locked On UCF. So we put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and to make us the number one podcast for your niche. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. Scott Frost said he likes what he sees from his team in terms of fight. And I got to agree with him. Look, it wasn't perfect, but I thought players kept their poise for the most part. And Andrew, they've got to pay attention to details, is what he said. The details and the fundamentals. If you are where UCF is at in terms of talent, the one thing you can be is fundamentally sound. And I think that, the teams that perform consistently week in and week out, they go out and they do the fundamental things well. You'll never be more than what you practice. And so you've got to practice the fundamentals. You've got to be solid at the fundamentals. And quite honestly, there were a lot of self-inflicted wounds, as Scott Frost noted in his weekly presser, that went beyond stall drives. It was false starts. It was holds. There was the offsides that erased a big defensive play. You got to clean it up. You have to clean it up, or it's going to come back to bite you in conference play.
Yeah, and these are unforced errors. The offsides calls, I think there was 4 of them or 5 of them. And yeah, they were bad. That's completely unforced. That's mental focus and stuff like that. Getting a little too ahead of yourself and getting a little over jazz, got to be smart. The other thing is turnovers, they had the backwards pass. You got to be smarter than that. And if you're going to do something like that, you've got to be accurate. And then, UCF definitely lost the turnover battle in this one. Actually, I think it was 1-1, but let me rephrase that. It was the ball got on the ground more often than not for on UCF side, and that's stuff that needs to be cleaned up. The penalties just shot themselves in the foot. You talk about those 12-13 play drives, they had 2 of them and got nothing.
Yeah, and
penalties are the reason why those drives got derailed. I mean, I think one ended in a missed field goal, but that's besides the point. It should have been more. I mean, you got down to the 1-yard line and you didn't score because a penalty pushed you out. It's stuff like that. And it goes back and also, execution. We were talking in the last segment about how the running game kind of disappeared. I mean, you look at each quarter by itself, and it looked like they got worse and worse and worse as the game went on. Fourth quarter, literally, UCF had 8 rushes as a team and an average less than 1 yard a carry. They became, one-dimensional. Granted, it was, through the air and they made it work, but UCF cannot take their foot off the gas. You're playing against a tough defense. Well, you know what? If you can't handle Jacksonville State's defense, how are you going to do against a Baylor, or a Texas Tech? I mean, when you start getting into the gauntlet of the conference season, if you can't handle this level, you're in trouble. I was looking at The Athletic this morning, and they had, their rankings of all the programs. I think UCF was 4th or 5th lowest Power 4 conference team. They actually went down in ranking after winning against Jacksonville State. I think they're in like the 70s. It shows the lack of faith that the outside world has in this program. And, until they show otherwise, I mean, can you blame them? What needs to be done by this coaching staff is look at this. This is what the world thinks of you. Prove them wrong. And then have them go out and do it. but they need to get, as you said, the fundamentals correct. You perform at 80% of how you practice. So if you practice fair, you're going to perform less than fair on game day. If you got the energy to take you over and you can't keep your composure, you're going to make those unforced mistakes that push you back. Now, the good thing is, outside of one offsetting unsportsmanlike conduct, by and large, UCF did not let their emotions get ahead of them. That's always a good thing. But okay, that's great. Now you got to be smarter. Move on ball, not on call. Don't jump off sides. Be aware of your line calls so you don't make a false start. Holding, it's going to happen. Basically everyone holds every play. The question is, do you get caught? Just don't get caught. There's not much you can do about that. The offsides are the really bad ones. For the most part, I thought UCF did a pretty good job on executing fundamentals such as outside containment. They did miss it on a couple of plays here and there that allowed for some chunk yardage, but by and large, they were able to keep Cam Cook between the tackles. And this is a really talented running back who UCF played last year at TCU, and they kept him in check there too. So did he break free a few times? Yeah, I mean, talented guy. It's going to happen here and there, but they by and large did a pretty good job of keeping him under wraps and doing the fundamental side of containment, bringing him, making him cut back inside where the defense can swarm him versus bounce to the outside and getting that open lane. They had good pressure on the quarterback. This was an issue they had last year. I think it was 4 or 5 games before they even had their first sack. They had 2. This was an area that I was very concerned about if they turn the corner. But this is a really talented defensive line. They proved it. They did well. Their numbers did well. Their grading did really well. John Walker, who we know is an absolute monster, missed last year due to injury. He's back, and he graded almost 73.9. Donnell Johnson, who's a linebacker, he only played 3 plays, but he was effective when he was on there. And then Jaden Bellamy, who had an outstanding game. Just he had the INT to lock up the game. 72.7. Horace Lockett, who had one of those big sacks. 71.6. I mean, the defense rated really well against this offense, and part of that is just a talent gap, but it was also a combination of execution and game plan. They did a really good job there. And if you traveled the internet a little bit, you could see a lot of negative views on Alex Grinch. Well, game 1, I think he did a pretty solid job of handling the stuff in front of him. We'll see how it goes when he deals with some Big 12 quality offenses. But first test, so far so good. Yeah,
look, Scott Frost likes the fight from his team. I think it's a good sign here for UCF fans, because effort never gets old. And, if a team comes out flat against UCF, they open Big 12 play with Kansas State. And look, man, I didn't think they looked very impressive against Iowa State in the opener in Dublin. So a good effort and some good improvement. They say the biggest improvement comes between week 1 and week 2 for most football teams. If that holds true for UCF, then they got a chance to make it interesting. North Carolina looked very unimpressive in their showing.
Oh, geez.
That
was awful.
Yeah. Suddenly I'm liking the Knights a lot more in that game than I did a couple weeks ago. But look,
I do want to point out, Mike, that the Sickos committee has circled UCF versus North Carolina as one of the games to keep an eye on.
Look, I've told you guys already. I feel like that UCF had a chance to steal that one. I was very consistent.
It may not be a steal at this point if things keep trending this way.
Woo, boy, that was rough. We'll see if their improvement comes between week 1 and week 2. Either way, we'll be here to talk about it. I want to thank you for joining me today. Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at UCFNightZone.com. Please go check out his work there. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll has all the going-ons in the Big 12, covering every single team, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.